So let's talk about the pre-sale property assessment. So this is something that I created because there's not pre-sale designers in every city. This isn't a service that everybody can have available to them. So I wanted to create an assessment that essentially took what I did in person and put it into a step-by-step guide that sellers could use to assess their own property and find the highest ROI opportunities and updates in order to make sure that their home showed the best when it went on the market. And I also think it's an amazing tool to have because when we show up at a listing consultation, we obviously want to stand apart from the other agents that they may or may not be interviewing. And so being able to say, use this assessment, and you already have a checklist of items that we might want to look at. First, I offer a really quick understanding about why we're even doing this, what listing design is, and why it's important. And then we jump into how we're going to assess the property. Introduce sellers to my prioritization method. My most important number one high priority non-negotiable are deferred maintenance and safety issues. Anything that visibly is ill kept or unsafe has to be repaired. If they aren't, you're going to be facing most likely lowball offers, investor clients, or depending on the market, but in the market as of November 2025, your listing may end up sitting for some time and suffering some price drops. So at the end of the day, spending even $1,000 repairing some deferred maintenance, maybe $5,000, it's still going to be cheaper than the first price drop if they aren't taken care of. And then the second most important priority is meaningful improvements. These are things that are going to be high ROI repairs that they will see a return on their investment. So for example, front door paint is one of the first and highest ROI opportunities that you can make because it just makes such a huge impact. It probably costs $100 to $300 to paint a door, and it's going to just bring such a positive impression to buyers. Another example would be lighting. Lighting is an easy update. It's relatively inexpensive. If you can't do it yourself, you can get an electrician to come in and install 10 lights. And at the end of the day, it's somewhat inexpensive. And you're going to see huge return on investment because it gives something that buyers are excited about. As soon as they walk in a house, they go, oh, wow, I really like that light fixture. They're not even looking at the almond colored, faceplate covers or switch plate covers, which is what sellers are all stressed about. They're like, my switch plate covers are almond. I'm like, okay, let's look at that 1980s chandelier right now and not worry about those light switch covers. And then could would be nice to have. And that is what I would consider okay, we're going all in. Okay, we're going to spend the money. We're going to touch every inch of this house and we're going to max it out, get it sold. Those are my nice to haves. So then I go through my prioritization because not only is there this prioritization system of, deferred maintenance, definitely should do it, nice to have. There's a prioritization system of front to back. So the first impression is the most important part of your listing, okay? The feeling that a buyer has the second they pull up, those seconds of them walking up the path to the front door, them standing at the front door, and them opening that front door and that first impression. That is going to carry so much weight for the rest of the showing that we have to prioritize those first impressions over everything else. Now, sure, kitchens and baths are still high ROI areas of your home where when you invest money, you should get it back. And buyers place a lot of weight into those. But consider the fact that the first impression lends itself to the impression of those spaces. So if you have a negative first impression as you're walking up, you might view a perfectly fine kitchen as worse because you already have a negative impression of the home. Whereas if you have a positive first impression and you have the same kitchen, they might all of a sudden think it's a great kitchen because they're happy. They're happy to be in this home. They feel like it's going to be theirs. And that's the power of the first impression. So that's what we're really trying to focus on. So prioritization, must, should, could, and then front to back. And then we prioritize the big three, which these are my highest ROI updates. These are paint, flooring, lighting. Those three categories, if you're going to spend anywhere, that's where I would spend my money. Buyers assume they're going to be really expensive. When they see ugly paint that they want to change, they think, oh God, we're going to have to paint this whole house. I don't want to do that. Seems like effort. Flooring, they go, it's going to cost a fortune to change out all this flooring, which it's not. But doing it up front, all of a sudden they're like, oh wow, new flooring throughout, positive impression. So these are important big 3 items. Now, after I go through that quick education and how we're going to prioritize once we're done with the assessment, because I want sellers to have that information going into the assessment that this is how we're going to prioritize after. Then we go from the curb to the backyard and we touch every space. And I give little ticklers here like, okay, check the trees, check the paint, check the shutters, check the gates, check the mail blocks, check the house numbers. A visual cue for every single area of the section that we're in. So, and then I give you a blank page after, so they can actually use this like a workbook. So stand across the street from the home. What jumps out in 3 seconds? Unnote anything unkept, tired, dirty, busy. And then there's an area for them to write everything here. An example: pressure wash, weed, add fresh mulch. They can write all the ideas of what they should do. So we go from curb appeal to the approach and the entry, the exterior envelope. That's going to be siding, paint, trim, caulks, fascia, soffits, vents, look for cracks, rot, missing caulk, all of it. Exterior major systems, roof siding, don't get on the roof, just look at the roof, paint, all of these important pieces on the outside, driveway, walks, fencing, gates. And then we're going to get inside. And then once we come in, we're going to look at the entry and we're going to look at the weather stripping, the doorbell, the locks, the lock set. Is there an odor, doorknobs, hinges, everything. And we're going to talk about lighting. I'm going to explain why lighting is so important. And then you're going to look at your lighting. Then you're going to look at your paint. You're going to look at the paint color. And I offer some color resources if you need help. And then flooring, because we're going to go through all these most important areas first. Windows, doors, living room, whatever. You can get the point. It's 70 pages long. Okay, so I'm skipping. And then when it's all done, we're going to do a buyer path rehearsal, because I suggest that every buyer walks through their house not once, at least twice. I say 3 times better, but why? Okay, the first walkthrough is going to be overwhelming. You're going to be looking at all of the stuff in your house. You're going to be zoomed in on walls and caulking and paint imperfections. And as you move through, it's hard to zoom from these like micro details to the macro picture, okay? So we go through the process once, we make our notes. Then we go through it again. And I like to zoom in on the first pass and then I zoom out on the second pass. And on the third, that's why I actually would do 3, is I walk through it like a buyer. And I pretend, if I'm a buyer, what would I be thinking here? And I make those notes as well. And then you ask, does it feel cohesive? Does it feel bright? How does it feel? Ask yourself these questions. Instead of zooming in on the actual details, just how does it feel? Because at the end of the day, the emotions of a buyer sell a home just as quick, if not as quick, as what the actual home is. So we need to make sure that we're accounting for that. So we do our buyer path rehearsal, and then we dig into the whole prioritization step. Using that prioritization framework that I shared earlier, I have you run through every single thing that you wrote down and assign a number to it, 1, 2, and 3. And I've even included how I do it. I have 3 columns on my paper and I write everything down. And then I organize it from the front of the house to the back of the house. I prioritize first impression. I prioritize the big 3, flooring, paint, and light fixtures. And then I prioritize the other big areas, kitchens and bathrooms. And from that, you're going to get a really nice prioritized list. And so once we go through this process of ranking everything 1, 2, 3, reorganizing our prioritized list, we're going to see exactly where to start. And that is the process I use. And from there, we can really dig into the actual design selections, and we'll move in from the first step, which is assess, into the second step, which is actually repairing and updating. So I hope this overview helped explain a bit about what this presale property assessment is and how it can help you or your sellers get their home ready and hopefully take a little bit off of your plate as an agent and not be the bearer of bad news all the time, telling them, oh, you need to do this, oh, you need to do that. Instead, let's let the sellers figure it out for themselves. You give this to them in advance. Somebody tells you, hey, I think I'm going to sell next year. This is what you need. You give it to them. Remember, they're going to remember that. When next year comes around, who are they going to call? They're going to call you. You already gave them a gift, something that's actually going to help them, free value. And that's why I think this pre-sale assessment, every agent really should have this in their back pocket to be sharing with their sellers. I think it's, well, if I do say so myself, I think it's amazing. So anyway, that's the assessment step. And then I'll see you in the next one. Repair and update.